not all men are the same and not all women are the same, but there is a theme, and even if you fall back to the classic old love languages, physical touch and words of affirmation are a very common theme through men.
You are listening to the Under the Rug podcast with Nalini Tranquim.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Under the Rug. I am your host, Nalini Tranquim. The topics that we uncover here are purposed to bring light into the dark areas of our lives so that there can be healing and restoration within our personal lives, which then ripples into our homes and ultimately into society as a whole. Well, for as long as issues remain buried under the rug, they are given free license to torment, to drag us down, to steal our joy and our strength, and the negative overflow of that is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, relational, and even financial. Today I am joined by Daniel Muggeridge, who was born and raised in Tasmania. He has built a diverse career that spans several industries and leadership roles. His entrepreneurial spirit has led him to found a consulting business and a tech startup, and he is now at the helm of yet another innovative tech company. He serves on several boards, contributing his expertise to organizations in drug rehabilitation, education across all levels, insurance, faith, and international aid and development. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Daniel Muggeridge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nalini. It's great to be with you. Goodness, that list of things sounds much more exciting to talk about than what we're here today to discuss. But we will follow where God leads.
Yes, come on. Daniel, you have had incredible accomplishments throughout your life. But today we are actually going behind closed doors and delving into your personal life. And I just want to start off first by saying thank you for being willing to come on the show today. I know that this hasn't been an easy decision for you, but I absolutely believe without a shadow of a doubt that your willingness and your openness and your vulnerability is going to heal some people through this episode. Now, you got married, you had 4 beautiful children, and 14 years into your marriage, you had an affair. Can you talk to us about the unraveling that ultimately led to the affair?
Wow. Yes, for sure. And look, just want to affirm, if I may, before you step into that your comments as you opened about these things being kept in the dark and the power that sin has, specifically because we keep it in the dark. And so my motivation here today is to hopefully encourage others to bring these things out into the light, and they lose the power, and it opens the pathway to healing. I don't think everybody needs to be on a podcast about these things or air the dirty laundry, but certainly when we keep it in the dark, that is when it keeps its grip on us, and when we bring it out into the light, we're able to have God's forgiveness washed through us, to have Him open us back to service and to the goodness of life. So
it's beautiful.
Just wanted to kind of frame it with that.
I love that.
So look, the background to my sinful affair is not an unusual story. A difficult marriage relationship, and my sense that needs were not met in that. I was traveling at the time, and in hotels for an extended period, and met somebody who admired me, and I was knocked off guard by that. I hadn't had that either in marriage or outside of it previously, and hadn't felt to be admirable. So wasn't ready with my armor.
Wow.
And had no sense of there being need for that. And that's absolutely not an excuse, of course, but it's what left me vulnerable And so I went where that took me rather than taking those circumstances to God.
Yeah. Would you say that it was a loveless marriage then?
Nalini, no, I wouldn't exactly say loveless. I think uh, love to me is certainly an emotional concept, but it's founded in something far deeper than emotion. And when it is founded on decision, on reliance on God, the emotion can come and go. It can swing, and that's just normal and natural. And our emotion, I mean, we had some great days, but it was hard from very early days, and right through 2 decades of marriage was all the classic things that are difficult between married couples. We had kind of all of them, and just didn't find overlap with pretty much any of those difficult topics, and enough to live in common ground.
Yeah. It saddens me in a way that this other woman's affection towards you came as a surprise almost. Because
Yeah,
shouldn't affection be a part of our married lives?
yeah, absolutely. It should. And of course, each of us receives affection in different ways as well. And
Yeah.
part of the art of love is to understand the way the other would receive affection, and um, to love in the way that the other person needs to be loved, rather than what's much easier is for us to love in the way that we receive love, but that will miss the mark
Yes.
more
Okay.
often than not.
You've hit the nail there. Learning how to love how the other person needs to be loved. Can you unpack that a little bit more coming from a man? I think our women need to hear this.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, not all men are the same and not all women are the same, but there is a theme, and even if you um, fall back to the classic old love languages, physical touch and words of affirmation are a very common theme through men.
Yeah.
Um, we speak fairly freely, I think, on this program, don't we? I have a mate whose insight is always on point, but very earthy about how he presents it. And you might need the beeper here, but he says that the manual for most men is just me and tell me I'm great, and that's
Yeah.
obviously it's much
Yeah.
much broader than sex in terms of the physical contact. But yeah, for me, physical contact and words of affirmation are very strong uh, in my DNA. And
Yes. Okay, but why do you think that is? And what is the effect of it on you as a man when you get that?
yeah, well, why? I mean, perhaps this is simplistic, but my simple answer to that is that is how God has made me. He crafts us all in different ways, and that's just who I am to my core. And the way it impacts is, um, if you withhold in an intimate relationship, if you withhold physical touch and words of affirmation from someone for whom that's really core, that withholding is such a powerful um, refusal of love, the way it's received. And it doesn't matter whether you buy gifts, it doesn't matter whether you um, spend quality time together. If your partner, your husband, is physical touch and words of affirmation, uh, then that's a really deep need in order for that love to be felt. It can be known academically, but won't be felt if it's not given in those terms. And of course, there's absolutely, these things are symmetrical, and it goes the other way around as well. And our call is to love our spouse regardless of whether we feel loved or not, and it's to, in fact, respect and admire our spouse regardless of whether we feel loved and respected, regardless of whether we feel they deserve it or not. That's our commitment.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like feel like people fall into the vicious trap of, because I'm not getting what I need from the relationship, right? So just as a woman here, if my man is not meeting my needs, I then withhold his needs. The wall between us grows.
Yeah. Yeah.
When if one of us were to just go, do you know what? I'm going to love him or her as they deserve and give them what they need, then love pours back anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree, Nalini. It doesn't even have to be a deliberate or conscious. The the dynamic is more that when I'm not feeling loved, I have to dig deeper to reframe around how another person receives love. And so it just requires more conscious, more deliberate, more dedicated effort.
Yeah.
Uh, and and that's a really difficult thing to do when you feel like the other person doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. I think sometimes women use withholding physical touch and intimacy as a form of punishment.
Yep, yep. And it's deadly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof. Okay. Also, an observation that I've made over the years is sometimes women can fall into the trap of treating their husbands as another one of their children.
Wow. Nalini, if withholding physical touch is deadly, that one is 100 times more so.
Yikes.
Uh, Ephesians talks about a lot of really challenging ideas. One of those is in a symmetrical pair where men are commanded to love their wives, and women are commanded to honor their husbands, and that is not accidental.
Yeah.
A couple of observations about that. One is that it doesn't say men love your wives when they are worthy of your love.
Oh.
And in fact, the command is necessary exactly and precisely because there will be times when the men will feel that the wife is not worthy of the love. And that's the point the command is actually relevant.
Wow.
But into the conversation, as you've framed it there, Nalini, the reverse is also true, that we have this idea in our culture that respect is earned. Well, not according to Ephesians in the marriage covenant. Respect and honor is commanded
Mm.
when your husband is worthy of it. Oh, no, sorry, that bit isn't in there.
Wow.
Your husband, you are commanded to honor and respect your husband. And it's precisely when you believe he's not worthy of it that the command is actually of any relevance at all.
Mm.
So Ephesians is then challenging both to the husband and the wife. Although in our culture, that idea of loving unconditionally is just a little bit less contentious. But the idea that a wife should honor and respect a husband who clearly is not deserving of it, according to her, in that moment, that's really deep and powerful
Yeah.
call. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it as it happens, it just it calls out the best in the husband when you do that.
Yes.
And it may take some time and it may take some patience. And of course the reverse also true, that when you love unconditionally, it draws out the best in the other. But in this context, it's that honor and respect that Ephesians calls out, specifically commanding the wife to the husband, specifically in the context where you're quite sure he doesn't deserve it. That's the challenge.
Yes. Yes. That's interesting. That got me thinking about when God created Eve to be Adam's helper. the word helper is the same word used as the Holy Spirit
Yeah,
to be our helper and to be our
yeah,
comforter. And
yeah,
that is, I believe, what God has purposed for us women, to come
yeah,
alongside our men, to love them, to nurture them, to bring out the best in them.
yeah.
And it's powerful. I actually believe that a woman can be man's greatest glory, but also man's greatest downfall.
Mm, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it, that the feminist movement would look at that Genesis 1 and 2 section and say, how patronizing is that? We've got to ditch that. But when you bring the observation, as you just have, that the Holy Spirit is framed in that one, the contribution of the Holy Spirit is framed in the same word.
Yeah.
What an honor
It is an
that is.
honor. It is such an
Yeah,
honor. It's such a privilege. And I don't know, I look at my relationship with my hubby and oh my word, I love him to bits. He's my best friend, and it's incredible because I've seen over the years when we're not in a good place, everything that flows out of him is from that not good place.
mm,
He struggles with work, he struggles to focus, he struggles to concentrate. It's like there's this cloud hovering over him. But when
mm,
we're in a good place and we're strong and we're fortified, man, it's like he can take the world. And I absolutely believe that to be true.
yeah. Yeah, Nalini, I firmly believe that the quality of our sexual purity and the quality of our marriage relationship is a total constraint on the quality and the impact that well on the impact that we can have in community and in kingdom over a career
Wow.
and a lifetime. And so if you're talking to a young person and they're thinking about their career and how to have an impact, um, well, you better start with a marriage
Wow.
relationship, your sexual purity, and you better continue with that focus too.
That's really good, Daniel.
The rest, as
Okay.
you say, flows out of that.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to unpack that a little bit more later. But what I want to do for now, because I know some of our audience's minds are ringing because they want to know more about your personal story. So if it's okay for a moment, I just want to delve a little bit deeper. I'm going to ask you a bit of a confronting question. How did you feel immediately after the affair?
Yeah, I was hoping we'd I had moved past the uncomfortable bits, but no, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, not at all, Nalini. It's important, and as I said at the beginning, it's bringing it out into the light that is so important.
Yeah.
And actually, that's the answer to your question. Dark is probably the pervading
Wow.
word that I would use. Uh,
Wow.
Dark, dirty, distant from God. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I think that's
As
probably it.
as hard as it is for you to say those words, for me to hear those words as a woman actually breaks that mindset that men are so emotionless and
Right.
it's so easy for them to just jump into bed with another woman and not give it a second thought. No, that is not the case.
Mm, mm. I don't know if you've heard it said that men have a nothing box. There's a whole little YouTube clip that describes the difference between men and women from this particular counselor's perspective very well. But men, the essence of it, without retelling the whole thing, is that men do have a capacity to compartmentalize and to kind of put things in boxes, and we can try and put a kind of an elbow on it to keep the lid on that box with the
Wow.
darkness in it.
Oh,
But Nalini, you can never really keep the lid on it, and that darkness oozes out
yeah,
like oil from a grounded tanker, and just has a way of covering everything. And
sure.
um, we can pretend that we've got it in the box, but no, it seeps
Yeah.
through all of life.
I'm sorry to ask you this, Daniel, but how did it feel seeing your missus for the first time after the affair?
Yeah, Nalini, it's such a darkness to me, and it's sort of like a PTSD response potentially. I mean, that overplays it, but it's kind of like that. That I actively try to forget details, and I've got a reasonably effective forgettery anyway. Those who know me well will know that. I think it's because I'm goal oriented and driven and facing forward rather than thinking about the backstory or the history. So I can't give you a hugely satisfying answer to that.
I think a lot of people believe that it's the affair that destroys the marriage. No.
No.
Like you say, there is a reason for the affair in the first place. That means there's already things that are broken and damaged within the marriage that then ultimately led to the affair.
Yeah. There is absolutely a reason. There is absolutely not an excuse, just to clarify.
Yes, because when you fall in love with someone, you're not purposefully going out of your way to hurt them.
No, and any time thereafter, not purposely going out of my way to hurt anybody either. And it's devastating not just to be aware of the hurt to me and to those immediately involved and to my family, but there's actually ripples well beyond that as well. And as I say, there's just that sense of purity and honoring a marriage is, to my mind, a real limiting factor on our contribution right across community and society and kingdom. And I would love to be someone that the Lord says, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and just feel like there's a bunch of what God might have called me to. There's just not quite there, and somehow it's wrapped up in all of this.
Yes.
And that's a real sadness to me.
Yes.
But God's a redeeming God, and
Yes.
and I'm in a new chapter now, and in a healthier place, and looking forward to what He's going to do in this new chapter.
Come on. I agree. Now, as you mentioned earlier, you didn't share about the affair with your wife till quite some time later. In fact, it was about 10 years later. What ultimately led you to telling her?
So we'd had difficult marriage for a long time, but there was a point at which that fell apart, and we separated. And we'd been separated for a year or so, still talking about whether it would be possible to reconcile. And there was a time where it looked much more likely that we would both invest in reconciling. And I chose at that time to say to my wife, I had something to confess, and the reason for doing it now, well, I should have done it a long time earlier, but the reason for doing it now is that if we reconcile, which I want to do, then it has to be a clean slate. There has to be a release of all baggage from prior to that, and a deeper voluntary honesty around that, in order to have a strong foundation for moving forward. And I knew that there was a risk that would blow up the reconciliation possibility. But one thing's for sure, that if we were reconciled, it would need to be healthier than it was. And this is only a part of that, but it's the part that I can access in a concrete way, in terms of it was my responsibility to confess. And so I actually confessed at that point to two sins. One was the affair, and the other was withholding that. And in fact, I at the time I did get advice at the 10 years prior, when the affair happened. I did get advice to ask whether I should confess to my wife. But to be transparent, I selected the person to give me that advice based on the advice I wanted to hear. I knew if I asked, metaphorically, Fred, he'd say, "Oh, you need to tell her. I'm not asking Fred." If I asked John would say, "Oh, you shouldn't tell her." Okay, I'll ask John. So I uncomfortably spent that decade going, yeah, but I asked advice, and that was the advice I was given not to tell. And I just knew in my spirit that that was the wrong advice. And actually, especially since I'd curated the advisor on that basis.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, the potential for reconciliation that had to be dealt with.
If you could go back in time, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Look, I think there's a need to be much more focused on the armor of God all the time and always. I think purity in small things is really critical.
Wow.
Um,
Hmm.
so things like porn, which I know, Nalini, you've discussed on this program before.
Yes, yes.
And I would say to well, actually, first of all, to the women, if you know a bloke, then it's almost certain that he either does struggle with porn or used to. And if he's in that latter category, I'll eat my hat if he hasn't got a small group of men around him that are helping him to stay accountable to it.
Wow.
But little things lead to big things, right?
That's right.
And so I think making sure that the garden is weeded um, is a constant and ongoing exercise. And so that's what I'd say to the women. But to the men, I would say just find yourself some accountability
Yeah.
around you. Just a small circle of really trusted blokes who will go the distance and dig into that difficult area with you. And make sure there's somebody in that group who has conquered it. In the moment, it's too late to be thinking about what you might do differently. It's over the years and the decades that it's things like sexual purity with porn. It's things like reading and praying as a husband and wife. It's before you get married, make sure you really are equally yoked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really,
So
really good.
it's all of that.
What's your advice to husbands when it comes to nurturing a healthy relationship with their wives?
Um, it's really challenging if there's not if you're not on the same page with that, because what I'd love to say is get in the word together and pray together. My ideal is that if you when you have a fight, even before you've left the heat of that fight, that's the moment to be praying together, talking to the
Yeah.
Lord. And if you can take that raw, unfiltered, emotional, reactive state of being hand in hand to the Lord, then you can conquer anything.
Yeah. It's so good.
Um, and developing and nurturing that would be, I think, the most important thing. And then everything else flows from that.
While you were speaking, you actually remind me of a woman who was married to a very, very difficult man. Her friends would actually tell her, just get out of this relationship, mate.
Right.
Like, it's, there's no point. But she loved the Lord. And so she was part of a little prayer group and she just prayed for him. She prayed for him and she loved him. Like, she cooked for him. She would tolerate his verbal abuse. And she would just pray. She would just quietly pray, bring it before the Lord. Lord, only you know. Only you know. And oh my goodness, it took years. It did take years. But if you were to see them now, like, you would not believe what she went through years prior. Their relationship is just so beautiful. And he absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, adores her. And one thing Sandra and I have learned over the years is that hurting people hurt others.
Yeah.
And God is the God of healing and restoration. And if he is the center of it all, then he is going to pour his healing and his restoration into our lives. And we're going to see the ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no denying it.
And Nalini, I have to ask you a question about your little story now. Does your friend now say that all of that patient persistence was worthwhile.
100%. 100%. She
There you go.
absolutely, she absolutely adores him. And just to see the turnaround in their marriage is such an inspiration. And so, yeah, I just feel now, right now, to just say to anyone who is in that situation where, oh my gosh, your partner is an absolute nightmare, and you're thinking, oh, is it even worth it? Yes, bring him or her before the Lord and intercede on their behalf, bridge the gap on their behalf, and watch and see what God does. And funnily enough, in and through you, before you actually then start to see the ripple effect in and through them.
It's a beautiful design. And I love that you brought us back to the language from Genesis that talks about a woman being a helper, the same language as the Holy Spirit is. What an honor to be called into the part of the sanctification process of someone like this. I mean, it's painful, but God shares that pain, right? Grief-stricken, God shares that grief. Agonizing, God shares the agony. But what a privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to ratify too that it doesn't mean that a woman loses her independence. For goodness sake. It doesn't mean that she can't be entrepreneurial in spirit and run her own businesses and flourish and kick butt. But at the same time, she's coming home to love and tend to her husband. I think it is a beautiful picture.
Yeah, it really is.
Daniel, after losing your family, your business, your income, you were uprooted from a household of 6 to a home of 1, right in the middle of COVID, in the most locked down city in the world. Can you talk to us about where you were at mentally and emotionally, and then what you decided to do?
Yeah, look, it's been massively hard, and as you correctly point out, I mean, I went from a busy, noisy household to one where I couldn't legally have a mate around for a cup of tea, and that's really dark. But it was a challenge because at the time I was still very much looking to hold on to or to restore marriage, and so there was an ambiguity about it as well. And am I facing forward and trying to build a new and healthy life beyond marriage, or am I kind of facing backwards? And it was a bit of sort of whiplash as I tried to navigate that. And right in the middle of that, I was praying and had the strongest sense that he just put one word on my mind to release. And actually, I argued with God, which is probably not a good idea. But first of all, I started out by saying, well, clearly that's not you, God, because marriage is permanent. And, you told me that. And we got married before you and before others. Release. And then I went, well, maybe it was just something I ate last night for dinner and I'm just making it up. And I release. And in the end, I just had to acknowledge that must be God that was speaking. And it's often, when he persists with his word like that, it's often something that cuts counter to what we're expecting or wanting, and therefore it needs a bit of insistence. So they were really difficult, tumultuous days, but I'm thankful for a group of friends around me that, whether in person or mostly remotely, checked in, kept me safe through that period. I'm thankful for a mate who nagged me to start running, and I laughed at him and told him that there was no way to put run and fun in the same book, let alone the same sentence. But after he nagged me to the point of my exasperation, I promised I'd get a pair of runners and promised nothing more. But I'm still running now.
Running.
and that physicality of it, and I've looked at diet and just been really conscious, Nalini, to bring some healthy rhythm and cadence and habits into this space, because it's so easy for a bloke who's just out on his ear to spiral into a depth of darkness. And I've seen it, and recently been to a funeral of someone who didn't make it out the other end of that process, and you just need to put health right throughout your rhythm, and you need help with that. You can't do it
Yes,
alone.
can't do it by yourself. Yes, we'll include resources in the show notes today, specifically for people who are navigating that. Talk to us about your motorbike ride.
Yeah. One of the things that I settled on as it was becoming clear that there was no way back in my marriage was the idea of chapters, and God brings chapters in our lives. You see it right through Old and New Testament as well. But there was very clearly a chapter closing in my world, and I wanted to mark that chapter close and to make space for a new chapter. You can't really lean into what's coming without having fully grieved what's gone. And I wanted to sort of dust myself off a little bit metaphorically, not literally, because it was the opposite. But I had lost my business as well as part of the financial settlement in the divorce. And that was my only income. So that's a bit of a downside. But the upside of that, Nalini, is that I had nobody who was relying on me for anything. I had a business that I was running that everybody kind of needed my input on, but no longer. So I took a career break, was where I started. Some people I know might go and sit on a beach for 6 months drinking pina coladas. That was never going to work for me. As soon as I had the idea of a sabbatical, a career break, I knew there had to be an adventurous element. And my God and I are both adventurous spirits. So we went on a road trip together.
I love that.
And I attempted to ride my motorbike from Melbourne all the way to London.
Wow.
And people say, well, how do you do that? And I just say, well, you need a snorkel at times. But it's actually when you lay the map out, it's surprisingly little water that you need to travel. So I rode past Adelaide, from Melbourne past Adelaide, straight up to Darwin, and from Darwin threw it on a boat across to Timor-Leste, which is really only 400 nautical miles. And then from Timor-Leste through into West Timor, which is part of Indonesia, and ferries through each of the islands, all the way through Indonesia, across to Malaysia, Thailand.
Wow.
And plan A was through Myanmar, but the border was still closed with the civil unrest from Myanmar to India. So I attempted then to go round, and I was in Laos, just west of Malaysia, east of Malaysia, sorry. And it was a day's ride from the China border when I smashed the bike, came off the side of the road, completely smashed my shoulder, and had to be flown back to Melbourne.
Oh my gosh.
But shoulders going well now, back on the same bike.
I reckon there's going to be a part 2. What did that experience do for you?
Well, it's interesting. The motivation was to spend time with my adventurous God and just to see where that led. I did expect I'd come back with a clear sense of what a next chapter should look like, and it hasn't had that impact on me. But I think one of the things that it has done, Nalini, is that I have been very goal-oriented, driven, always pack as much as I can into every minute. And I think that drivenness over my previous adult decades has not left enough space for God to be the director. And I've
Wow.
through the trip itself, he was very specifically slowing me down, hedging me in, and directing the trip. But it forced me to take time to just be with God. And I've been determined to bring that change of pace into my next season, and I think that's really important. Not to say being driven is in and of itself is a bad thing. If it's the right posture before God, it can be healthy in the right context. But I just want to be, and I think there'll be more fruitfulness out of that in this next season.
Absolutely.
Nalini, we are not human doings. We are human beings.
Wow.
And in fact, our best doing comes from our being, and our best being comes, in fact, from our whose we are. We are God. So If you want to be somebody who has a powerful output that's about doing, well, you better think about being. If you want to think about being, you'd better think about whose your being is. And so trace it back to the cross. So best doing out of your being, best being out of your whoosing.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's a quote right there. Oh, that's so good. Oh, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing on a topic that I've wanted to uncover for years, but I've just not had anyone brave enough to do so until now. So I just want to say thank you. Do you have any closing words that you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, look, it is a bit overwhelming to have shared, and so that my brain is possibly a bit fried from all of that. But I think it would have to be back to your very first comments, and my response to that, which is not everybody has to go on a podcast, and you don't need to air your dirty laundry. But it's the very darkest secrets that you have that are holding you back. Find a way, an appropriate way, a sensitive way to get them out into the light. And that releases sin's darkest grip on you. It opens the door to healing, and it makes sanctification possible.
So
Get it into the light.
So good, Daniel. Ladies and gentlemen, life is fragile. I truly believe that Papa God's desire for marriage is for us to draw out the best in each other, for husbands to champion, love, provide, and protect their wives, and for wives to support, love, and champion their men. When both parties are being nurtured, neither party will want to destroy that. The only reason God instructs us in the Bible not to be unequally yoked is not because he wants to destroy your fun or because he's a God of rules and regulations, but rather because he knows that when you love him and follow him, you become more like him. And because he is love, then you exude love. But if your partner does not love or follow him, Papa God will only ever be on the fringes of your friend group and won't ever truly be Lord of your married lives combined. In order for a marriage to truly work, Papa God must be at the center. In fact, just late last night, I found myself saying to my man, "Babe, I love how you love Papa God, because it's he who teaches you to love me just as I need to be loved in order to be the best version of me for you." And I believe that's how it should be, and it's what Papa God wants for us. So for those of you who have come out of a broken relationship, I want to say I am sorry for what you have been through. But let me encourage you to take one specific step forward. Come and spend some time in the presence of your Papa God. Allow his love to wash over you, renew and restore you so that you can get back up, healed and whole, ready to step into the new adventure that awaits you. And I'll close with this. It's Isaiah 40 verse 31 in the Passion Translation of the Bible, and it says, "But those who entwine their hearts with Yahweh will experience divine strength. They will rise up on soaring wings and fly like eagles, run their races without growing weary, and walk through life without giving up." Now is not the time to give up. Now is the time to get up. We'll be sure to include all of Daniel's links in today's show notes. You must check out his website, okay? His motorbike tour was absolutely insane. And I believe that there is going to be a continuation of that adventure in the coming days. You're going to want to follow him. Any questions, please drop me an email, info@nalini tranquim.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Under the Rug podcast with Nalini Tranquim. To learn more about Nalini's online coaching programs, to book Nalini for your upcoming events, or for more information, please visit nalinitranquim.com/contact or email us at info@nalinitranquim.com.